first night. It began with the smell of old parchment and the whisper of robes brushing stone. Hogwarts. The name had echoed in my house for years, passed from my mother's lips like a prayer. And now I was here, alone. I remember the way my mother woke me that morning. She had brewed my favorite tea, lavender and mint, for the nerves, and pressed my second-hand school robes with her wand until they lay flat across the foot of my bed. She packed my satchel carefully, folding each parchment square as if I were a ministry official, not an awkward, wiry 11-year-old. Her hands trembled, though she tried not to show it. "You'll be brilliant," she said. I didn't believe her. The train ride was a blur, a tunnel of strange smells, loud laughter and sweets I couldn't afford. No one sat beside me. A boy with red hair peeked into my compartment, wrinkled his nose, and moved on. I pretended I hadn't seen. The castle loomed like something out of a dream, majestic, unreachable, too perfect for someone like me. I remember clutching my satchel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Inside, everything smelled of wax and wood smoke. The sorting hat sang its silly song and children laughed. I did not. When my name was called, I stepped forward with a tight chest and a throat too dry to swallow. The hat was too large. It slipped over my eyes and whispered secrets no one else could hear. Ah, a clever mind, ambitious too, but there's more. A storm in you, child. Slytherin, then. Yes. And just like that, it was done. I walked to the table, eyes burning, ears ringing. The other Slytherins barely noticed. I found a bed near the end of the dormitory. The curtains were thick, the air damp. I unpacked slowly, laying out each item with care, as my mother had shown me. Her note was folded in my pocket, worn from my fingers. The Slytherin common room was colder than I expected, not in temperature, but in spirit, lit mostly by green-tinged torches and the occasional flicker of magic. The stone walls were slick with age. The lake pressed in from outside, giving the windows an eerie glow. I remember staring out and seeing the shadow of something swim by. A giant squid, perhaps. Or worse. My bed had already been chosen. The older boys said nothing, only jerked their heads toward the one in the corner. It smelled faintly of damp wool and smoke. I made it my own with careful folds and quiet prayers. The first night, I sat on the edge of that bed while the other boys laughed and threw pillows, careless and loud. I kept my curtains shut. I whispered softly, the way my mother used to when things got bad at home. "God," I said, quietly, so only he and I could hear. "I'm not sure what I'm doing here, but please, help me not be invisible." A soft breath, a long silence, and somehow, I didn't feel quite so alone. The days that followed were difficult. I didn't fit in. I spoke too precisely. My clothes smelled like the attic. I knew spells the others hadn't learned yet. But that only made things worse. Some boys mocked my hair. Others called me names. I kept my head down. But there were moments, small ones. I liked the library. I liked the stillness. And potions. Professor Mullerin said nothing when I brewed the draught of peace faster than anyone in the class, but he nodded once, almost imperceptibly. It felt like sunlight. Herbology was less promising. The greenhouse smelled of damp earth and dragon dung. My hands shook as I wrestled with a flutter fan, and a girl in my group scowled when I dropped a root. Professor Furblot gave me a sympathetic glance. It didn't help. Transfiguration was worse. Professor Durellin had eyes like a hawk and a voice that could pierce stone. When I failed to turn my matchstick into a needle, she didn't yell. She only looked disappointed. That was worse. The hallways between classes were a gauntlet. Suits of armor clanked when you passed. Staircases shifted at will, and I found myself late more often than not. Once, I spilled my bag in the third-floor corridor. Laughter echoed. I didn't look to see who it was. At night, I prayed again, always in a whisper, always from under my covers. I prayed for my mother, for strength, for someone to see me, not just look, but see. I kept her letter beneath my pillow. I read it until the ink faded. You are not alone, Sev. Not truly. You are loved. Years later, I still remember that first week. The smell of damp stone, the aching in my chest when no one saved me a seat, the comfort of a whispered prayer when the silence pressed in. And even now, all these years later, I still whisper, not out of fear, but out of habit, out of faith. And I believe it still does.